It's cold and it's dark outside. Well, obviously that part depends on exactly where you are in the world, but here at least it is cold and it is dark. So this week, rather than standard stream, thank you, I decided that we would do something a little bit shorter, but a little bit more festive. And we are going to be indulging in a couple of small Christmas ghost stories. An old tradition. And these, the two that I will be reading, are going to be from my favourite master of the genre, M.R. James. First off, I just want to double check that with the mods that sound levels are all okay, because this is a slightly different sound setup to most of my streams. And we have a few Ko-fis to read out before I get underway. So, a Ko-fi from Kate B. Merry Christmas. Good news update. I'm going to have a nephew. Can't wait to meet James Bernard in April. Also, I think this means I'm psychic, since I dreamt I had a baby boy back in September. That's wonderful news, and that's really nice to hear. Thank you for sharing it with us, and also for having a nephew, I guess. I've already kind of broken the somber tone of the ghost stories. It's fine. Ko-fi from Ko-fi supporter. Merry Christmas. A Ko-fi from Carvey. Happy holiday season. Here's to a much better 2021. Thank you for being a bright spot in the midst of this hell year. I seem a bit quiet. Okay, let's just... Let's see if we can raise that a little bit. Let's give it a bit of a boost. Okay, how's that? A little bit better? Oh, yeah, of course, I had the... whoa! Secret phone! Secret phone from which I'm reading the Ko-fis! That's it's a little behind the scenes for you. Anyway, I'm probably, just to warn everyone, there's going to be two stories, and I'm probably going to end up reading most of the Ko-fis in between the two, so I don't disrupt the flow. So, this is M.R. James, Montague Rhodes James, one of the sort of the earliest, the pioneers of what we think of as the modern ghost story. He used to read one, and he used to write them and read them at Christmas to his sort of Society of Fellow Academics at, I believe it was Cambridge.
Don't know why you're asking me.
I don't know. Some of them are brilliant. Some of them are, not amazing. The first one I'm going to read is one of his shorter ones, and I think it's one that's not generally considered one of his masterworks, but it's always landed with me. It's called A School Story. Two men in a smoking room were talking of their private school days. At our school, said A, we had a ghost's footmark on the staircase. What was it like? Oh, very unconvincing. Just the shape of a shoe with a square toe, if I remember right. The staircase was a stone one. Never heard any story about the thing. That seems odd when you come to think of it. Why didn't someone invent one, I wonder? You can never tell with little boys. They have a mythology of their own. There's a subject for you, by the way. The folklore of private schools. Yes, the crop is rather scanty, though. I imagine if you were to investigate the cycle of ghost stories, for instance, which the boys at private schools tell each other, they would all turn out to be highly compressed versions of stories out of books. Nowadays, the Stand and Pearsons and so on would be extensively drawn upon. No doubt. They weren't born or thought of in my time. Let's see, I wonder if I can remember the staple ones that I was told. First, there was the house with a room in which a series of people insisted on passing a night, and each of them in the morning was found kneeling in the corner and had just time to say, "I've seen it," and died. Wasn't that the house on Berkeley Square? I dare say it was. Then there was the man who heard a noise in the passage at night, opened his door and saw someone crawling towards him on all fours with his eye hanging out on his cheek. There was, besides, let me think. Yes, the room where a man was found dead in bed with a horseshoe mark on his forehead, and the floor under the bed was covered with marks of horseshoes also. I don't know why. Also, there was a lady who, on locking her bedroom door in a strange house, heard a thin voice among the bed curtains say, "Now we're shut in for the night." None of those had any explanation or sequel. I wonder if they still goes on. I wonder if they go on still, these stories. Oh, likely enough. With additions from the magazines, as I said. You never heard, did you, of a real ghost at a school? I thought not. Nobody has that ever I came across. From the way in which you said that, I gather that you have. I don't really know. But this is what was in my mind. It happened at my school 30-odd years ago. I haven't had any explanation of it. The school I mean was near London. It was established in a large and fairly old house, a great white building with very fine grounds about it. There were large cedars in the garden, and as there are in so many of the older gardens in the Thames Valley, and ancient elms in the 3 or 4 fields where we used to play our games. I think probably it was quite an attractive place, but boys seldom allow for their schools to possess any tolerable features. I came to the school in the September, soon after the year 1870, and amongst the boys who arrived on that same day was one whom I took to, a Highland boy whom I will call MacLeod. I needn't spend time in describing him. The main thing is that I got to know him very well. He was not an exceptional boy in any way, not particularly good at books or games, but he suited me. The school was a large one. There must have been from 120 to 130 boys there as a rule, and so a considerable staff of masters was required, and there were rather frequent changes among them. Just a drop of port. One term, perhaps in my 3rd or 4th, a new master made his appearance. His name was Sampson. He was a tallish, stoutish, pale, black-bearded man. I think we liked him. He had travelled a good deal, and had stories which amused us on our school walks, so that there was some competition among us to get within earshot of him. I remember too, dear me, I have hardly thought of it since then, that he had a charm on his watch chain that attracted my attention one day, and he let me examine it. It was, I now suppose, a gold Byzantine coin. There was an effigy of some absurd emperor on one side. The other side had been worn practically smooth, and he had cut on it rather barbarously, his own initials, GWS, and a date, 24th July, 1865. Yes, I can see it now. He told me he had picked it up in Constantinople. It was about the size of a florin, perhaps rather smaller. Well, the first odd thing that happened was this. Sampson was doing Latin grammar with us. One of his favourite methods, perhaps it is rather a good one, was to make us construct sentences out of our own heads to illustrate the rules he was trying to make us learn. Of course, that is a thing which gives a silly boy a chance of being impertinent. There are lots of school stories in which that happens, or anyhow there might be. But Sampson was too good a disciplinarian for us to think of trying that on with him. Now, on this occasion, he was telling us how to express remembering in Latin, and he ordered us each to make a sentence, bringing in the verb memini, I remember. Well, most of us made up some ordinary sentence, such as, I remember my father, or he remembers his book, or something equally uninteresting. And I dare say a good many put down memino librum meum, or so forth. But the boy I mentioned, MacLeod, was evidently thinking of something more elaborate than that. The rest of us wanted to have our sentences passed and get on to something else, so some kicked him under the desk, and I, who was next to him, poked him and whispered to him to look sharp. But he didn't seem to attend. I looked at his paper and saw he had put nothing at all. So I jogged him again, harder than before, and upbraided him sharply for keeping us all waiting. That did have some effect. He started and seemed to wake up, and then very quickly he scribbled about a couple of lines on his paper and showed it up with the rest. As it was the last, or nearly the last, to come in, and as Sampson had a good deal to say to the boys who had written Miminiscimus Patre Meo, and the rest of it, it turned out that the clock struck 12 before he had to... It turned out the clock struck 12 before he got to MacLeod, and MacLeod had to wait afterwards to have his sentences corrected. There was nothing much going on outside when I got out, so I waited for him to come. He came very slowly when he did arrive, and I guessed there had been some sort of trouble. "Well," I said, "what did you get?" "Oh, I don't know," said MacLeod. "Nothing much, but I think Samson's rather sick with me." "Why, did you show him up some rot?" "No fear," he said. "It was all right as far as I could see. It was like this. A memento, that's right enough for remember, and it takes a genitive. Memento putre intra quatra taxos." "What silly rot," I said. "What made you shove that down? What does it mean?" "That's the funny part," said MacLeod. "I'm not sure what it does mean. All I know is it just came into my head and I corked it down. I know what I think it means, because just before I wrote it down, I had a sort of picture of it in my head. I believe it means, remember the well among the four. What are those dark sorts of trees that have red berries on them? Mountain ashes, I suppose you mean." "I've never heard of them," said MacLeod. "No, I'll tell you. Yews." "Well, what did Samson say?" "Well, he was jolly odd about it. When he read it, he got up and went to the mantelpiece and stopped quite a long while without saying anything with his back to me. And then he said, without turning round and rather quiet, 'What do you suppose that means?' I told him what I thought, only I couldn't remember the name of the silly tree. And then he wanted to know why I put it down, and I had to say something or other. And after that he left off talking about it and asked me how long I'd been here and where my people lived and things like that. And then I came away, but he wasn't looking a bit well." I don't remember any more that was said by either of us about this. Next day MacLeod took to his bed with a chill or something of the kind, and it was a week or more before he was in school again. And as much as a month went by without anything happening that was noticeable. Whether or not Mr. Sampson was really startled as MacLeod had thought, he didn't show it. I am pretty sure, of course, now that there was something very curious in his past history, but I'm not going to pretend that we boys were sharp enough to guess any such thing. There was one other incident of the same kind as the last which I told you. Several times since that day we had had to make up examples in school to illustrate different rules, but there had never been any... I'm trying to do a ghost story, okay? Try to do a ghost story. Cool. Yeah.
Is he making a fuss?
It's making it remarkably difficult to turn the page. But there had never been any sort of row, except when we did them wrong. At last there came a day when we were going through those dismal things which people call conditional sentences, and we were told to make a conditional sentence expressing a...
Sorry, no, it's fine. I'm just taking a picture of the cat. Carry on.
At last there came a day when we were going through those dismal things which people call conditional sentences, and we were told to make a conditional sentence expressing a future consequence. We did it, right or wrong, and showed up our bits of paper, and Samson began looking through them. All at once he got up, made some odd sort of noise in his throat, and he rushed out by the door that was just by his desk. We sat there for a minute or two, and then, I suppose it was incorrect, but we went up, I and one or two others, to look at the papers on his desk. Of course I thought someone must have put some nonsense down or other, and Samson had gone off to report him. All the same, I noticed that he hadn't taken any of the papers with him when he ran out. Well, the top paper on the desk was written in red ink, which no one used, and it wasn't in anyone's hand who was in the class. They all looked at it, MacLeod and all, and took their dying oaths that it wasn't theirs. Then I thought of counting the bits of paper, and of this I made quite certain, that there were 17 bits of paper on the desk, and 16 boys in the form. Well, I bagged the extra paper and kept it, and I believe I have it now. And now you will want to know what was written on it. It was simple enough, and harmless enough, I should have said. Si tu non veneris ad me, ego veniam ad te. Which means, I suppose, if you don't come to me, I'll come to you. Could you show me the paper? Interrupted the listener. Yes, I could, but there's another odd thing about it. That same afternoon I took it out of my locker. I know for certain it was the same bit, for I made a finger mark on it. and no single trace of writing of any kind was there on it. I kept it, as I have said, and since that time I've tried various experiments to see whether sympathetic ink had been used, but absolutely without result. So much for that. After about half an hour, Sampson looked in again, said he had felt rather unwell, and told us we might go. He came rather gingerly to his desk and gave just one look at the uppermost paper, and I suppose he thought he must have been dreaming. Anyhow, he asked no questions. That day was a half-holiday, and the next day Sampson was in school again, much as usual. That night, the third and last incident in my story happened. We, MacLeod and I, slept in a dormitory at right angles to the main building. Sampson slept in the main building on the first floor. There was a very bright full moon. At an hour which I can't tell exactly, but sometime between 1 and 2, I was woken up by somebody shaking me. It was MacLeod, and a nice state of mind he seemed to be in. "Come," he said, "come, there's a burglar getting in through Sampson's window." As soon as I could speak, I said, "Well, why not call out and wake everybody up?" No, he said. "I'm not sure who it is. Don't make a row. Come and look." Naturally, I came and looked, and naturally there was no one there. I was cross enough and should have called MacLeod plenty of names, only I couldn't tell why. It seemed to me that there was something wrong. Something that made me very glad I wasn't alone to face it. We were still at the window looking out, and as soon as I could, I asked him what he had heard or seen. "I didn't hear anything at all," he said. "But about 5 minutes before I woke you, I found myself looking out of this window here. And there was a man sitting or kneeling on Sampson's windowsill and looking in. And I thought he was beckoning." What sort of man?" MacLeod wriggled. "I don't know," he said, "but I can tell you one thing. He was beastly thin, and he looked as if he was wet all over, and," he said, looking round and whispering as if he hardly liked to hear himself, "I'm not at all sure that he was alive." We went on talking in whispers some time longer, and eventually crept back to bed. No one else in the room woke or stirred the whole time. I believe we did sleep a bit afterwards, but we were very cheap the next day. And next day Mr. Sampson was gone, not to be found, and I believe no trace of him has ever come to light since. In thinking it over, one of the oddest things about it all has seemed to me to be the fact that neither MacLeod nor I ever mentioned what we had seen to any third person whatsoever. Of course, no questions were asked on the subject, and if they had been, I'm inclined to believe we could not have made any answer. We seemed unable to speak about it. "That is my story," said the narrator. "The only approach to a ghost story connected with the school that I know, but still, I think, an approach to such a thing. A sequel to this may perhaps be reckoned highly conventional, but a sequel there is, and so it must be produced. There had been one more listener to the story, and in the latter part of that same year, or of the next, one such listener was staying at a country house in Ireland. One evening his host was turning over a drawer full of odds and ends in the smoking room. Suddenly he put his hand upon a little box. "Now," he said, "you know about old things. Tell me what that is." My friend opened the little box and found in it a thin gold chain with an object attached to it. He glanced at the object and then took off his spectacles to examine it more narrowly. "What's the history of this?" he asked. "Odd enough," was the answer. "You know the yew thicket in the shrubbery? Well, a year or two back we were cleaning out the old well that used to be in the clearing here, and what do you suppose we found?" "Is it possible that you found a body?" said the visitor, with an odd feeling of nervousness. "We did, but what's more, in every sense of the word, we found 2. Good heavens, 2? Was there anything to show how they got there? Was this thing found on them?" "It was. Amongst the rags of the clothes that were on one of the bodies. A bad business, whatever the story of it might have been. One body had the arms tight round the other. They must have been there 30 years or more, long enough before we came to this place. You may judge we filled the well up fast enough. Do you make anything of what's cut on that gold coin you have there?" "I think I can," said my friend, holding it to the light, but he read it without much difficulty. It seems to be GWS, 24th July, 1865. And that is A School Story by M.R. James. Right. Let us catch up on the messages. Hopefully... Okay, there's quite a few, but not an unsurmountable amount. First up, today's poll. Let's predict the end of the first story, because I've definitely for sure read M.R. James before. So the loser of this, with 6%, it's the plot of Spectre (brackets James Bond), probably. All British stories are the same. To be fair, I'm not completely confident that modern James Bond is actually written by British people, but who can say? 6%, okay, I know it's meant to be ghosts, but what if this time vampires or werewolves? 11%, we were dead all along, spooky. 13%, there's a pretty lady in this one, maybe, that's all that matters. You clearly haven't read much M.R. James. I'll be honest, like, I like his stuff, but it is a dude fest. It's just all academic men going places and maybe being murdered by a monster. 15%, Johnny is going to read the first few chapters of his book instead. Oh, that'll be a bait and switch. This is just all one big advert. Though I'll be honest, I don't think many people, like, I feel like everyone watching my streams has either already bought my book or has
Already
a good reason,
knows about it,
or has a good
yeah.
reason to not have done so. So I don't know if that would be the most effective advertisement. But if you don't know, I have a book called 13 Stories available at all good UK bookshops, and a lot of those deliver internationally, such as Waterstones. Now you do. 17%. The true ghost was Christmas all along. Oh, no, wait, the true Christmas was about ghosts this whole time. Yeah, yep, Ghost Holiday, Halloween Who. And the winner with 32%. The reserved gentleman settles down with their new ghost spouse and lives a long, happy life and afterlife with them. I mean, that's not... that's not necessarily... I mean, happy is maybe... who can say, but that's not necessarily not the conclusion of that story we just read. In a very real way. You know? So 32% of you, good work. Turns out maybe you know M.R. James after all. Corin Dyke gifted 5 subs. Oh, thank you. Merry Christmas. Rogapan gifted a sub. Merry Christmas to you as well. A Kofi from Max. Good news update. I started my first dose of tea yesterday. Hope you, Sasha, Cats and Mods have a lovely Christmas and a nice weekend. What a good Christmas present. Zalia Chimera gifted a sub. Fenris6070 gifted a sub. Trillium and Violets gifted 5 subs. Thank you all. A Kofi from Nikki. Happy holidays and a happy new year. Thank you for the stories. Well, thank you for listening and enjoying the stories. Actually, you know what? Let's go back to reading Kofi, the book of Kofi's.
Sorry to interrupt. There seem to be a fair few people that would like a volume boost.
A volume boost. I will try. Sorry, buddy. Okay, let's try that. How's that? Okay. Bryce C18 or Bryce 18th century, or Bryce circa 18th century. Merry Christmas. Synesthesia check. Johnny's voice is dark green with light blue wavy lines hovering in front of the green. That's nice. I'll take that. Uffit gifted 5 subs. Vila Katzen gifted 2 subs. Alama67 gifted a sub. Retzmad has gifted 10 subs. Maddie, what are you doing? Maddie, you're modding. This is, I mean, obviously, thank you for the Christmas presents to all our people. I suppose it is money that is going back into the...
back to the community and, yeah.
And it's there, that's like, well, thank you all for the gifted, for your Christmas presents to each other in the forms of subscriptions to us. A Kofi from Nikki, happy holiday and a new year. Happy hoy day and a Happy New Year. Thank you for the stories. Kofi from Lane, Happy Christmas. It's been lovely having your streams while I'm isolating alone during the holiday season. Kofi from Catastrophic, Happy holidays to you, Sasha, Steve, Mods, Chat, and Cats. I wish you all the best, PS. Brackets, no spoilers, don't worry. I've started reading 13 stories and got so spooked at one point that I started making mac and cheese, lol. Love your writing. Have a good one. I'm very proud to have scared someone into mac and cheese. That's quite that's an achievement that warms my heart. I do apologise. Got a slight frog in my throat. It's all that big Christmas dinner. Christmas lunch. A Kofi from Francis. Happy holidays, Johnny, Sasha, Mods, Cats, and Steve. Hope you all have a nice time. Wearing my new Magnus shirts. Just read some 13 stories and drinking some nice cocoa. Feeling very festive, so have some money. That's lovely, thank you. A Kofi from Rianne. Wanted to say happy holidays and that I'm very thankful to be spending Christmas with my good friend Crux. I hope that's how it's spelled. It's pronounced. We are listening to the stream together and making cookies, and it is a good time. Love to Johnny, Sasha, Mods, Chat, and Cats. That sounds wonderful. A Kofi from Hawkfurs. Thank you for being a bright spot this year and for everything you do, just all the good vibes you bring. This has been a particularly rough year for me outside of everything going on, but you guys have been one of the few things that has made it a little more bearable. A Kofi from Kofi Supporter, wishing you and your family a very Merry Christmas. Can't wait to watch the VOD and enjoy the story. Well, I hope it's, when you're finally watching this, I hope it's lived up to your expectations. A Kofi from Lake King of Mars, happy Christmas to Johnny, Sasha, Cats, Mods, and Chat. Thank you for these cozy Christmas vibes. A Kofi from Kofi Supporter, I'm sick and alone for the holiday, and I really appreciate you streaming today. Your streams always lift my spirits. Thank you. That's really nice to hear, and I'm sorry you're having a rough time. It is one of the reasons that I wanted to do a stream today, even if it wasn't the normal one, just because, not everyone's Christmasing as hard as we are. A Kofi from Irradiated Snakes, Crimis, smiley face. Okay, glad to have you on board, Irradiated Snakes. Life said, Johnny, I beg you keep petting Kitty. I'm doing it as much as I can, while still, practically speaking, continuing to read a ghost story. Rembies, the three genders, dead, beastly, and wet. That is, that is M.R. James. In M.R. James, the three genders are dead, beastly, and wet, but they're all also men and academics and white and 40 plus. A Kofi from Ace Dolphin. Merry Christmas. Last month my mum had to get wrist surgery and she was sad that she wouldn't be able to make a Christmas turkey. So now I'm watching the stream while cooking a turkey for the first time. Wish me luck. Good luck. It's definitely going to go better than the first time we tried to cook. Well, who was it in our Marlborough Road house back in uni when we tried to cook that turkey and it turned yellow somehow?
What do you mean, who was it? It was all of us.
It was all of us. We were all cooking the turkey together. Yeah, it's going to go better than that.
It went weird.
It went very weird. We ate it anyway. Did not get food poisoning, but should have. By rights. If there was any cosmic justice in the world, we would have all got food poisoning. Kofi from Jenny and Kevin. Thanks for the spooky stories and cats. Two of my favourite things. A Kofi from Ash. Merry Christmas, Sir Pounce. Yeah. And Johnny and Sasha. Thanks for all the entertainments, brackets, and cats you've given us all this year. A Kofi from Caden. Merry Christmas. Thank you for the joy your streams have brought this year. Much love to Johnny, Sasha, Mods, Chat, and Cats. Bug Museum says it's sold out everywhere, Johnny. Waterstones just says publisher reprinting. If you weren't aware yet, your book is going into another printing. It's a weird one.
But not in physical shops.
Yeah, it's a weird one, actually. If you are in the UK and looking and having difficulty, most branches of bookshops still have copies. If you look for click and collect, basically everywhere still has copies because it's all the online delivery, because individual bookshops will order the books, but the franchise will also have a centralized stock they ship internationally. So a lot of the for delivery stock is out of stock, but like most branches of Waterstones, and I think WH Smith as well, still have like copies in. So if you're in the UK and you're having trouble getting it, look into Click and Collect. I know that doesn't really help a lot of you internationally, but just a thought. A Ko-fi from Nicholas Kringle. Ho ho ho. Sorry. Ho ho ho. Admittedly, the holiday spirit is hard to come by this year, even for suspicious coughing. Well, the book doesn't ship this far north. I had to pick it up on the flyover. Happy Christmas to all, and to all the good night. Sorry, I thought the suspicious coughing was the end of the Santa Claus bit, but it actually went right to the end. So I do apologise, Nicholas, for abandoning your voice halfway through. A Ko-fi from Ko-fi supporter. Today is my birthday. For obvious reasons, it has not been a good one, but this is making it much better for me. Thank you.
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday! That's a hell of a birthday to have. My younger brother is the 23rd of this month, and like I've always thought he had it rough, but Christmas Day, birthday. Well, I suppose it depends on your own attitude towards Christmas and your birthday, but I can imagine it's a rough one this year. Happy birthday. Charlie ? Odd request. I need a Twitch username, and I have 0 thoughts. If you wouldn't mind, the help would be great. I would say your Twitch username should be Snoozing Ghost Cat, followed by however many numbers you like. A Ko-fi from Pascal. Hello, Johnny, Sasha, Cats & Co. Happy holidays to all of you. Your work has been helping me a lot get inspired and get back into writing lately. I'm very grateful for this. I hope you guys have a good time today. We're having a lovely Christmas, actually. It was touch and go, but a few days ago, but we're actually having a really nice time. A Ko-fi from Pia. Merry Christmas. I got some cash money this year, so have some too. My sibling gifted me a box shaped like a tape recorder to use for dice, and it's very spooky and very cool. That's a really fun little dice. Steve, can you? I'm gonna. It's dumb, but just dice bag. Could you pass me the little? My parents sent a bunch of gifts through, including from the official Dungeons and Dragons plushie line. It's a little dragon, and the belly opens, and there's some dice inside. There's some dice inside the dragon. It's I'm not like, oh, I'm gonna go through all my Christmas presents. But someone mentioned dice bag, and I do.
Someone's requested you show that off.
Oh really?
Yeah.
So this, I am, however, going to show this because this is the blanket that Sash painstakingly destroyed himself to make over like 80 hours of crocheting and weaving and knotting. Was the what's
a little knotting,
like it right at the end, and it is cozy and it is beautiful, and it's unfortunately slightly too bulky to be part of the stream. I was considering having it sort of just over my lap, old man style, but the composition of the shot didn't work out, alas. Ko-fi from Trillium and Violets. Hello, Johnny and Sasha and Kitties. Hello, mods and chat. A very Merry Chrysler to you all. My good holiday news is that my employer let us know we're getting vaccines in January. I'm very excited. Hope you all had a lovely stress-free day. That is exciting. Congratulations. A Ko-fi from Taliesin. Merry Christmas. Spending the holidays alone this year. This stream is a lovely little way of having some community. I'm really glad to hear that. A Ko-fi from Zedrobber. Can't tell you how much better this is making my night. Thank you. Happy holidays. Hope you're all having a wonderful day. We're having a very nice day. After this stream ends, we're going to have some Christmas cake, and I'm going to show, me and Sash are going to show Steve Arthur Christmas, which if you haven't seen, very good Christmas movie. A Ko-fi from Benny. Hello, I recently got a tattoo. It's a sheet ghost floating above a pair of Converse sneakers.
That's fun.
That's a really cool tattoo.
That's a fun tattoo.
And my tattoo artist said I needed to name it. I'm horrible with names, and I thought since tonight is pretty ghostly, it would fit the theme. I'd very much like a name for my ghostly bud. Okay, well let's just pick a random story. Let's go with... Ooh, The Diary of Mr. Pointer.
Mr. Pointer's a great name for a
Mr.
ghost.
Pointer. Poynter. That is the name of your ghost. A Kofi from Are You Here? Happy Holidays. A Kofi from Probs Not Hawkeye. Happy Holidays, Johnny, Sasha, Cat, Steve, Mods, and Chat. Watching the stream as my mum and sister watch Hallmark movies in the background. It's a weird clash of vibes, but still fun. That actually sounds like I don't know. I can see those vibes like bouncing off each other quite pleasingly. A Kofi from Robin J. Happy Christmas. The essay that was about English lit villains from Anglo-Saxons to Renaissance got a good grade. Also, I got a sewing machine, so I'm about to make the worst Jane Prentice worm in existence with human teeth. Smiley face. I dispute the smiley face, but I'm very happy for you. Kofi from Eldritch Fluff. Thank you for this is making year is good. My copy of 13 Stories is arriving Monday. Brilliant. A Kofi from Hecate. Thanks for streaming today. I never had ghost stories on Christmas, and this is nice. One question: is Steve the cat? Thanks. All holidays, y'all. No, that cat is Pouncelot. Steve is
Steve is that noise you hear.
Yeah, Steve is the chuckling in the background. No, Steve is our housemate, and just a fine good lad. Kofi from Odin. Good Yule. Hope you'll have had a great holiday. Spent mine with 3 great cats. My sister always brings her sweet cat who loves to complain about everything. Aww. I love a moany cat. Unless I'm trying to sleep. A Kofi from... last Kofi before our second story. A Kofi from Squeenayart? Squeenayart. Hey Johnny, Sasha, Steve and Cats. It's my first Christmas after coming out to my family with my actual name, so it's been a weird holiday. Decided to share some of the gift giving. Thanks for the cozy stream and hope you have a wonderful Christmas. That's intense, and but I think that's a really good thing. Hope it hasn't been too weird, and glad we can help. So, for the second story, we are going to be going with...
Oh, Johnny, could I please have your... I just need to check your emails.
What?
I need to... I need a code that was sent to your email.
Oh, right. Yeah, sure. That was just...
Cheers.
I'll be real, that was a weird way to phrase it.
Yeah,
but,
I understand now. Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, we are going to go with one of M.R. James's classics, A Warning to the Curious. The place on the east coast which the reader is asked to consider is Sebra. It is not very different now from what I remember it has been when I was a child. Marshes intersected by dikes to the south, recalling the early chapters of Great Expectations, flat fields to the north merging into heath, fir woods, and above all gorse inland. A long seafront and a street. Behind that a spacious church of flint with a broad, solid western tower and a peal of 6 bells. How well I remember their sound on a hot Sunday in August, as our party went slowly up the white, dusty slope of road towards them, for the church stands at the top of a short, steep incline. They rang with a flat, clacking sort of sound on those hot days, but when the air was softer they were mellower too. The railway ran down to its little terminus farther along the same road. There was a gay white windmill just before you came to the station, and another down near the shingle at the south end of the town, and yet others at higher ground to the north. There were cottages of bright red brick with slate roofs. But why do I encumber you with these commonplace details? The fact is that they come crowding to the point of the pencil when it begins to write of Sebra. I should like to be sure that I had allowed the right ones to get onto the paper. But I forgot. I have not quite done with the word-painting business yet. Walk away from the sea and the town, past the station and turn up the road on the right. It is a sandy road parallel with the railway, and if you follow it, it climbs to somewhat higher ground. On your left, you are now going northward, is heath. On your right, the side towards the sea, is a belt of old firs, wind-beaten, thick at the top, with the slope that old seaside trees have, Seen on the skyline from the train, they would tell you in an instant, if you did not know it, that you were approaching a windy coast. Well, at the top of my little hill, a line of these firs strikes out and runs towards the sea, for there is a ridge that goes that way. The ridge ends in a rather well-defined mound commanding the level fields of round grass, and a little knot of fir trees crowns it. And here you may sit on a hot spring day, very well content to look at blue sea, white windmills, red cottages, bright green grass, church tower, and the distant Martello Tower to the south. As I have said, I began to know Seabury as a child, but a gap of a good many years separates my early knowledge from that which is more recent. Still it keeps its place in my affections, and any tales of it that I pick up have an interest to me. One such tale is this. It came to me in a place very remote from Seabury, and quite accidentally, from a man who I have been able to oblige enough in his opinion to justify his making his confidant to this extent. I know all that country, more or less, he said. I used to go to Seabury pretty regularly for golf in the spring. I generally put up at the Bear with a friend. Henry Long it was. You knew him, perhaps? Slightly, I said. And we used to take his sitting room and be very happy there. Since he died, I haven't cared to go there.
Wait, what?
And I don't know that I should...
What are you, sorry?
Oh. And I don't know that I should And I don't know that I should, anyhow, after the particular thing that happened on our last visit. It was in April, 19... Sorry, guys, your voices can be picked up by the microphone. So, sorry. It was in April 1921 we were there. By some chance, we were almost the only people in the hotel. So the ordinary public rooms were practically empty, and we were the more surprised when, after dinner, our sitting room door opened and a young man put his head in. We were aware of this young man. He was rather a rabbity, anemic subject, light hair and light eyes, but not unpleasing. So when he said, "I beg your pardon, is this a private room?" we did not growl and say, "Yes, it is." But Long said, or I did, no matter which, "Please come in." "Oh, may I?" he said, and seemed relieved. Of course it was obvious that he wanted company, and as he was a reasonable kind of person, not the sort to bestow his whole family history on you, we urged him to make himself at home. "I dare say you find the other rooms rather bleak," I said. Yes, he did, but it was really too good of us, and so on. That being got over, he made some pretence of reading a book. Long was playing patience, I was writing. It became plain to me after a few minutes that this visitor of ours was in rather a state of fidgets or nerves, which communicated itself to me, and so I put away my writing and turned to engage him in talk. After some remarks, which I forget, he became rather confidential. "You'll think it very odd of me," this was the sort of way he began, "but the fact is I've had something of a shock." Well, I recommended a drink of some cheering kind, and we had it. The waiter coming in made an interruption, and I thought our young man seemed very jumpy when the door opened. But after a while he got back to his woes again. There was nobody he knew in the place, and he did happen to know who we both were. It turned out there was some common acquaintance in town, and really he did want a word of advice, if we didn't mind. "Of course," we both said. "By all means, or not at all," and Long put away his cards, and we settled down to hear what his difficulty was. "It began," he said, "more than a week ago, when I bicycled over to Froston, only about 5 or 6 miles, to see the church. I'm very much interested in architecture, and it's got one of those pretty porches with niches and shields. I took a photograph of it, and then an old man who was tidying up in the churchyard came and asked if I'd care to look into the church. I said yes, and he produced a key and let me in. There wasn't much inside, but I told him it was a nice little church, and he kept it very clean. But, I said, the porch is the best part of it. We were just outside the porch then, and he said, "Ah, yes, that is a nice porch, and do you know, sir, what's the meaning of that coat of arms up there?" It was the one with the 3 crowns, and though I'm not much of a herald, I was able to say yes. I thought it was the old arms of the Kingdom of East Anglia. "That's right, sir," he said. "And do you know the meaning of them 3 crowns that's on it?" I said I'd no doubt it was known, but I couldn't recollect to having heard it myself. Well then, he said, for all's you're a scholard, I can tell you something you don't know. Them's the 3 holy crowns that were buried in the ground near by the coast to keep the Germans from landing. I can see you don't believe that. But I tell you, if it hadn't been for one of 'em holy crowns being there still, them Germans would have landed here time and again, they would. Landed with their ships and killed man, woman and child in their beds. Now then, that's the truth, what I'm telling you, that is, and if you don't believe me, you ask the rector. There he comes. You asked him, I says. I looked round, and there was the rector, a nice-looking old man, coming up the path. And before I could begin assuring my old man, who was getting quite excited that I didn't disbelieve him, the rector stuck in and said, "What's all this about, John? Good day to you, sir. Have you been looking at our little church?" So then there was a little talk which allowed the old man to calm down, and then the rector asked him again what was the matter. "Oh," he said, "it weren't nothing, only I was telling this gentleman he'd asked you about the unholy crowns." "Ah, yes, to be sure," said the rector. "That's a very curious matter, isn't it? But I don't know whether the gentleman is interested in our old stories, eh?" "Oh, he'll be interested fast enough," says the old man. "He'll put his confidence in what you tells him, sir. Why, you known William Ager yourself, father and son, too." Then I put in a word to say how much I should like to hear all about it, and before many minutes I was walking up the village street with the rector, who had 1 or 2 words to say to parishioners, and then on to the rectory, where he took me into his study. He had made out on the way that I really was capable of taking an intelligent interest in a piece of folklore, and not quite the ordinary tripper, so he was very willing to talk, and it is really rather surprising to me that this particular legend, he told me, has not made its way into print before. His account of it was this. "There has always been a belief in these parts in the 3 holy crowns. The old people say they were buried in different places near the coast to keep off the Danes or the French or the Germans, and they say that one of the 3 was dug up a long time ago and another has disappeared by the encroaching of the sea, and one's still left doing its work, keeping off invaders. Well, now, if you have read the ordinary guides and histories of this country, you will remember perhaps that in 1687 a crown, which was said to be the crown of Redwald, King of the East Angles, was dug up in Rendlesham, and alas, melted down before it was even properly described or drawn. Well, Rendlesham isn't on the coast, but it isn't so very far inland, and it's on a very important line of access. And I believe that this is the crown which the people mean when they say that one had been dug up. Then on the south, you don't want me to tell you where there was a Saxon royal palace which is now under the sea, eh? Well, there was the 2nd crown, I take it. And up beyond these 2, they say, lies the 3rd. "Do they say where it is?" of course I asked. He said, "Yes, indeed they do, but they don't tell." And his manner did not encourage me to put the obvious question. Indeed, of that I waited a moment and said, "What did the old man mean when he said you knew William Ager, as if that had something to do with the crowns?" "Oh, to be sure," he said. "Now that's another curious story. These Agers, it's a very old name in these parts, but I can't find that they were ever people of quality or big owners. These Agers say, or said, that their branch of the family were the guardians of the last crown. A certain old Nathaniel Ager was the first one I knew. I was born and brought up quite near here, and he, I believe, camped out the place during the whole of the War of 1870. William, his son, did the same, I know, during the South African War. And young William, his son, who only died fairly recently, took lodgings at the cottage near the spot. I've no doubt it hastened his end, for he was a consumptive by exposure or night watching, and he was the last of that branch. It was a dreadful grief to him to think that he was the last, but he could do nothing. The only relations at all near him were in the colonies. I wrote letters for him to them, imploring them to come over on business very important to the family, but there has been no answer. So the last of the Holy Crowns, if it's there, has no guardian now." That's what the rector told me, and you could fancy how interesting I found it. The only thing I could think of when I left him was how to hit upon the spot where the crown was supposed to be. I wish I'd left it alone. But there was a sort of fate in it, for I bicycled back past the churchyard wall for as I bicycled back past the churchyard wall, my eyes caught a fairly new gravestone, and on it was the name William Ager. Of course I got off and read it. It said, "Of this parish, died at Seaborough, 1920, age 28. There it was, you see, a little judicious questioning in the right place, and I should at least find the cottage nearest the spot. Only I didn't quite know what was the right place to begin my questioning at. Again, there was fate. It took me to a curiosity shop down that way, you know, and I turned over some old books, and, if you please, one was a prayer book of 1740-odd in a rather handsome binding. I'll just go and get it. It's in my room." He left us in a state of some surprise, but we had hardly time to exchange any remarks when he was back, panting, and handed us the book opened at the fly-leaf, on which was, in a straggly hand, "Nathaniel Ager is my name, and England is my nation. Seaborough is my dwelling place, and Christ is my salvation. When I am dead and in my grave, and all my bones are rotten, I hope the Lord will think on me when I am quite forgotten." The poem was dated 1754, and there were many more entries of Agers, Nathaniel, Frederick, William, and so on, ending with William, 1920. "You see," he said, "anybody would call it the greatest bit of luck. I did, but I don't now. Of course, I asked the shopman about William Ager, and of course he happened to remember where he lodged in a cottage in the North Field and died there. This was just chalking the road for me. I knew which the cottage must be. There is only one sizable one up about there. The next thing was to scrape some sort of acquaintance with the people, and I took a walk that way at once. A dog did the business for me. He made at me so fiercely that they had to run out and beat him off, and then naturally begged my pardon, and we got into talk. I had only to bring up Ager's name and pretend I knew, or thought I knew, something of him, and then the woman said how sad it was him dying so young, and she was sure it came of him spending the night out of doors in the cold weather. And then I had to say, 'Did he go out on the sea at night?' And she said, 'Oh, no, it was on the hillock yonder, with the trees on it.' And there I was. I know something about digging in these barrows. I've opened many of them in the down country, but that was with owner's leave, and in broad daylight, and with men to help. I had to prospect very carefully here before I put a spade in. I couldn't trench across the mound, and with these old firs growing there, I knew they would be very awkward tree roots. Still, the soil was very light and sandy and easy, and there was a sort of rabbit hole of some sort that might be developed into a tunnel. The going out and coming back at odd hours to the hotel was going to be the awkward part. When I made up my mind about the way to excavate, I told the people that I was called away for the night, and I spent it out there. I made my tunnel. I won't bore you with the details of how I supported it and filled it in when I'd done, but the main thing is, I got the crown. Naturally, we both broke out in exclamations of surprise and interest. I, for one, had long known about the finding of the crown at Rendlesham, and had often lamented its fate. No one has ever seen an Anglo-Saxon crown, or at least no one had. But our man gazed at us with rueful eyes. "Yes," he said, "and the worst of it is, I don't know how to put it back." "Put it back?" we cried out. "Why, my dear sir, you've made one of the most exciting finds ever heard of in this country. Of course it ought to go to the jewel house at the Tower. What's your difficulty? If you're thinking about the owner of the land and treasure trove and all that, we can certainly help you through. No one's going to make a fuss about technicalities in a case of this kind." Probably more was said, but all he did was put his face in his hands and mutter, "I don't know how to put it back." At last Long said, "You'll forgive me, I hope, if I seem impertinent, but are you quite sure you've got it?" I was waiting to ask much the same question myself, for of course the story did seem a lunatic's dream when one thought it over. But I hadn't quite dared to say what might hurt the poor young man's feelings. However, he took it quite calmly, really, with the calm of despair, you might say. He sat up and said, "Oh yes, there's no doubt of that. I have it here in my room, locked up in my bag. You can come and look at it if you like. I won't offer to bring it here." We were not likely to let the chance slip. We went with him, his room was only a few doors off. The Boots was out collecting shoes in the passages. The Boots was just collecting shoes in the passage, or so we thought. Afterwards we were not so sure. Our visitor, his name was Paxton, was in a worse state of shivers than before and went hurriedly into the room and beckoned us after him, turning on the light and shut the door carefully. Then he unlocked his kit bag and produced a bundle of clean pocket handkerchiefs in which something was wrapped, laid it on the bed and undid it. I can now say that I have seen an actual Anglo-Saxon crown. It was of silver, as the Rendlesham one is always said to have been. It was set with some gems, mostly antique intaglios and cameos, and was of rather plain, almost rough workmanship. In fact, it was like those you see on coins and in manuscripts. I found no reason to think it was later than 9th century. I was intensely interested, of course, and I wanted to turn it over with my hands, but Paxton prevented me. "Don't you touch it," he said. "I'll do that." And with a sigh that was, I declare to you, dreadful to hear, he took it up and turned it about so we could see every part of it. "Seen enough," he said at last, and we nodded. He wrapped it up and locked it in his bag and stood looking at us dumbly. "Come back to our room," Long said, "and tell us what the trouble is." He thanked us and said, "Will you go first and see if the coast is clear?" That wasn't very intelligible, for our proceedings hadn't been, after all, very suspicious, and the hotel, as I said, was practically empty. However, we were beginning to have inklings of... we didn't know what. And anyhow, nerves are infectious. So we did go, first peering out as we opened the door and fancying, I found we both had the fancy, that a shadow, or more than a shadow, but it made no sound, passed from before us to one side as we came out into the passage. "It's all right," we whispered to Paxton. Whispering seemed the proper tone, and we went with him, between us, back to our sitting room. I was preparing, when we got there, to be ecstatic about the unique interest of what we had seen, but when I looked at Paxton, I saw that it would have been terribly out of place, and I left it to him to begin. "What is to be done?" was his opening. Long thought it right, as he explained to me afterwards, to be obtuse, and said, "Why not find out who owns the land, and in a form—" "Oh, no, Paxton broke in impatiently. "I beg your pardon, you've been very kind, but don't you see, it's got to go back, and I daren't be there at night, and daytime's impossible. Perhaps, though, you don't see. Well then, the truth is that I've never been alone since I touched it." I was beginning some fairly stupid comment, but Long caught my eye and I stopped. Long said, "I think I do see, perhaps, but wouldn't it be a relief to tell us a little more clearly what the situation is?" Then it all came out. Paxton looked over his shoulder and beckoned to us to come near him, and began speaking in a low voice. We listened most intently, of course, and compared notes afterwards, and I wrote down our version, so I am confident I have what he told us almost word for word. He said, "It began when I was first prospecting, and put me off again and again. There was always somebody, a man, standing by one of the firs. This was in daylight, you know. He was never in front of me. I always saw him with the tail of my eye on the left or the right, and he was never there when I looked straight for him. I would lie down for quite a long time and take careful observations and make sure there was no one, and then, when I got up and began prospecting again, there he was. And he began to give me hints, besides, for wherever I put that prayer book, short of locking it up, which I did at last, when I came back to my room, it was always out on my table on the flyleaf where the names are, and one of my razors across it to keep it open. I'm sure he just can't open my bag, or something more would have happened. You see, he's light and weak, but at the same time I daren't face him. Well then, when I was making the tunnel, of course, it was worse. And if I hadn't been so keen, I should have dropped the whole thing and run. It was like someone scraping at my back all the time. I thought for a long time it was only soil dropping on me. But as I got nearer the crown, it was unmistakable. And when I actually laid it bare and got my fingers into the ring of it and pulled it out, there came a sort of cry behind me. Oh, I can't tell you how desolate it was, and horribly threatening too. It spoiled all my pleasure in my find, cut it off that moment. And if I hadn't been the wretched fool I am, I should have put the thing back and left it. But I didn't. The rest of the time was just awful. I had hours to get through before I could decently come back to the hotel. First, I spent time filling up my tunnel and covering my tracks, and all the while he was there trying to thwart me. Sometimes, you see him, and sometimes you don't, just as he pleases, I think. He's there, but he has some power over your eyes. Well, I wasn't off the spot very long before sunrise, and then I had to get back to the junction of Seaborough and take a train back. Though it was daylight fairly soon, I don't know if that made things much better. There were always hedges or gorse bushes or park fences along the road, some sort of cover, I mean. And I was never easy for a second. And then when I began to meet people going to work, they always looked at me very strangely. It might have been that they were surprised at seeing anyone so early, but I didn't think it was only that, and I don't now. They didn't look exactly at me. And the porter at the train was like that too, and the guard held the door open after I'd gotten into the carriage, just as he would if there was someone else coming, Oh, you may be very sure it isn't my fancy, he said with a dull sort of laugh. Then he went on. And even if I do get it put back, he won't forgive me. I can tell that. And I was so happy a fortnight ago. He dropped into a chair, and I believe he began to cry. We didn't know what to say, but we felt we must come to the rescue somehow, and so it really seemed the only thing. We said if he was so set on putting the crown back in its place, we would help him. And I must say that after what we had heard, it did seem the right thing. If these horrid consequences had come on this poor man, might there not really be something in the original idea of the crown having some curious power bound up with it to guard the coast? At least that was my feeling, and I think it was Long's too. Our offer was very welcome to Paxton, anyhow. When could we do it? It was nearly 10:30. We could contrive to make a late-night walk, plausible to the hotel people, that very night. We looked out of the window. There was a brilliant full moon, the Paschal moon. Long undertook to tackle the boots and propitiate him. He was to say that we should not be much over the hour, and if we did find it so pleasant that we stopped out a bit longer, we would see that he didn't lose by sitting up. Well, we were pretty regular customers of the hotel and did not give much trouble, and we were considered by the servants to be not under the mark in the way of tips, and so the boots was propitiated and let us out to the seafront, and remained, as we heard later, looking after us. Paxton had a long coat over his arm, under which was the wrapped-up crown. So we were off on this strange errand before we had time to think how very much out of the way it was. I have told this part quite shortly on purpose, for it really does represent the haste with which we settled our plan and took action. The shortest way is up the hill and through the churchyard, Paxton said, as we stood a moment before the hotel, looking up and down the front. There was nobody about. Nobody at all. Seaborough, out of the season, is a early, quiet place. We can't go along the dyke by the cottage because of the dog, Paxton also said, when I pointed out that I thought a shorter way along the front and across the 2 fields. The reason he gave was good enough. We went up the road to the church and turned in at the churchyard gate. I confess to having thought that there might be some lying there who might be conscious of our business. But if it was so, they were also conscious that one who was on their side, so to say, had us under surveillance, and we saw no sign of them. But under observation we felt we were, as I have never felt it at another time. Especially was it so when we passed out of the churchyard into a narrow path with close, high hedges, through which we hurried as Christian did through that valley, and so got out into open fields. Then along hedges, though I would sooner have been in the open, where I could see if anyone was visible behind me. Over a gate or two, and then a swerve to the left, taking us up onto the ridge, which ended in that mound. As we neared it, Henry Long felt, and I felt too, that there was what I can only call a dim presence waiting for us, as well as a far more actual one attending us. Of Paxton's agitation all this time I can give you no adequate picture. He breathed like a hunted beast, and we could not either of us look at his face. How he would manage when we got to the very place we had not troubled to think. He had seemed so sure that it would not be difficult. Nor was it. We never saw anything like the dash with which he flung him. I never saw anything like the dash with which he flung himself at a particular spot in the side of the mound and tore at it, so that in a very few minutes the greater part of his body was out of sight. We stood holding the coat and that bundle of handkerchiefs and looking, very fearfully, I must admit, about us. There was nothing to be seen. A line of dark firs behind us made one skyline. More trees than the church tower 1/2 mile off to the right, cottages and a window on the horizon on the left. Calm sea dead in front. Faint barking of a dog at a cottage on a gleaming dyke between us and it. The full moon making that path we know across the sea. The eternal whisper of the Scotch firs just above us, and of the sea in front. Yes, in all this quiet, an acute, an acrid consciousness of a restrained hostility very near us, like a dog on a leash that might be let go at any moment. Paxton pulled himself out of the hole and stretched a hand back to us. "Give it to me," he whispered. "Unwrapped." We pulled off the handkerchiefs, and he took the crown. The moonlight just fell on it as he snatched it. We had not ourselves touched that bit of metal, and I have thought since that it was just as well. In another moment Paxton was out of the hole again and busy shovelling back the soil with hands that were already bleeding. He would have none of our help, though. It was much the longest part of the job to get the place to look undisturbed. Yet, I don't know how, he made a wonderful success of it. At last he was satisfied and we turned back. We were a couple of 100 yards from the hill when Long suddenly said to him, "I say, you've left your coat there. That won't do. See?" And I certainly did see it. The long, dark overcoat lying where the tunnel had been. Paxton had not stopped, however. He only shook his head and held up the coat on his arm. And when we joined him, he said, without any excitement, as if nothing mattered any more, "That wasn't my coat." And indeed, when we looked back again, that dark thing was not to be seen. Well, we got out to the road and came rapidly back that way. It was well before 12 when we got in, trying to make a good face on it, put a good face on it, and saying, Long and I, what a lovely night it was for a walk. The Boots was on the lookout for us, and we had made remarks like that for his edification as we entered the hotel. I gave another look up and down the seafront before he locked the front door and said, "You don't meet many people about, I suppose, sir?" He gave another look up and down the seafront before he locked the front door and said, "You didn't meet many people about, I suppose, sir?" "No, indeed, not a soul," I said, at which I remember Paxton looked oddly at me. "Only I thought I see someone turn up the station road after you gentlemen," said the Boots. "Still, you was 3 together, and I don't suppose he meant mischief." I didn't know what to say. Long merely said, "Good night," and we went off upstairs, promising to turn off all lights and to go to bed in a few minutes. Back in our room we did our very best to make Paxton take a cheerful view. "There's the crown safe back," we said. "Very likely you'd have done better not to touch it," and he heavily assented to that. "But no real harm has been done, and we shall never give this away to anyone who would be so mad as to go near it. Besides, don't you feel better yourself? I don't mind confessing," I said, "that on the way there I was very much inclined to take your view about being followed, but going back it wasn't at all the same thing, was it?" "No, it wouldn't do." "You've nothing to trouble yourselves about," he said, "but I'm not forgiven. I've got to pay for that miserable sacrilege still. I know what you're going to say. The church might help, yes, but it's the body that has to suffer. It's true I'm not feeling that he's waiting outside for me just now, but..." Then he stopped. Then he turned to thanking us, and we put him off as soon as we could. And naturally we pressed him to use our sitting room next day, and said we should be glad to go out with him. Or did he play golf, perhaps? Yes, he did, but he didn't think he should care about that tomorrow. Well, we recommended him to get up late and sit in our room in the morning while we were playing, and we would have a walk later in the day. He was very submissive and piano about it all, ready to do just what we thought best, but clearly quite certain in his own mind that what was coming could not be averted or palliated? I don't know that word. Could not be averted or palliated. You'll wonder why we didn't insist on accompanying him to his home and seeing him safe into the care of brothers or someone. The fact was, he had nobody. He had a flat in town, but lately he had made up his mind to settle for a time in Sweden, and he had dismantled his flat and shipped off his belongings and was whiling away a fortnight or 3 weeks before he made a start. Anyhow, we didn't see what we could do better than sleep on it, or not sleep very much, as was my case, and see what we felt like tomorrow morning. We felt very different, Long and I, on as beautiful an April morning as you could desire, and Paxton also looked very different when we saw him at breakfast. The first approach to a decent night I seem ever to have had, was what he said. But he was going to do as we had settled, stay in probably all the morning and come out with us later. We went to the links, we met some other men and played with them in the morning, and had lunch there rather early, so as not to be late back. All the same, the stares of death overtook him. Whether it could have been prevented, I don't know, but I think he would have been got at somehow, do what we might. Anyhow, this is what happened. We went straight up to our room. Paxton was there, reading quite peaceably. Ready to come out shortly? Ready to come out shortly, said Long, say in a half-hour's time. Certainly, he said. And I said we would change first, and perhaps have baths, and call for him in half an hour. I had my bath first, and went and lay down on my bed, and slept for about 10 minutes. We came out of our rooms at the same time, and went together to the sitting-room. Paxton wasn't there, only his book. Nor was he in his room, nor in the downstairs room. We shouted for him. A servant came out and said, "Why, I thought you gentlemen had gone out already, and so did the other gentleman. I heard you were calling from the path there, and run out in a hurry, and I looked out the coffee-room window, but I didn't see you. However, he run off down the beach that way." Without a word, we ran that way too. It was the opposite direction to that of the last night's expedition. It wasn't quite 4 o'clock, and the day was fair, though not so fair as it had been. So there was really no reason, you'd say, for anxiety. With people about, surely a man couldn't come to that much harm. But something in our look as we ran out must have struck the servant. For she came out onto the steps and pointed and said, "Yes, that's the way you went." We ran on as far as the top of the shingle bank and there pulled up. There was a choice of ways, past the houses on the seafront or along the sand at the bottom of the beach, which, the tide being now out, was fairly broad. Or, of course, we might keep along the shingle between those two tracks and have some view of both of them. Only that was heavy going. We chose the sand, for that was the loneliest, and someone might come to harm there without being seen from the public path. Long said he saw Paxton some distance ahead, running and waving his stick, as if he wanted to signal to people who were out ahead of him. I couldn't be sure. One of those sea mists was coming up very quickly from the south. There was someone, that's all I could say. And there were tracks on the sand, as of someone running who wore shoes. And there were other tracks made before those. For the shoes sometimes trod in them and interfered with them. Tracks of someone not in shoes. Oh, of course, it's only my word you've got to take for this. Long's dead. We'd no time or means to make sketches or take casts, and the next tide washed everything away. All we could do was to notice these marks as we hurried on. But there they were over and over again, and we had no doubt whatever that what we saw was the track of a bare foot, and one that showed far more bones than flesh. The notion of Paxton running after anything like this, and supposing it to be the friends he was looking for, was very dreadful to us. You can guess what we fancied, how the thing he was following might stop suddenly and turn round on him, and what sort of face it would show, half seen at first in the mist, which all the while was getting thicker and thicker. And as I ran on, wondering how the poor wretch could have been lured into mistaking that other thing for us, I remembered his saying, "He has some power over your eyes." And then I wondered what the end would be, for I had no hope now that the end could be averted, and, well, there is no need to tell all the dismal and horrid thoughts that flitted through my head as we ran on into the mist. It was uncanny, too, that the sun should still be bright in the sky, and we could see nothing. We could only tell that we were now past the houses, and had reached that gap there is between them and the old Martello Tower. When you are past the tower, you know, there is nothing but shingle for a long way. Not a house, not a human creature, just that spit of land, or rather shingle, with the river on your right and the sea on your left. And just before that, just before the Martello Tower, you remember there is the old battery, close to the sea. I believe there are only a few blocks of concrete left now. The rest have all been washed away. But at this time there was a lot more, though the place was a ruin. Well, when we got there, we clambered to the top as quick as we could to take breath and look over the shingle in front of us. In front, if by chance the mist would let us see anything. But a moment's rest we must have. We had run a mile at least. Nothing whatever was visible ahead of us. We were just turning by common consent to go down and run hopelessly on, when we heard what I can only call a laugh. And if you can understand what I mean by a breathless, a lungless laugh, you have it. But I don't suppose you can. It came from below, and swerved away into the mist. That was enough. We bent over the wall. Paxton was there at the bottom. You don't need to be told that he was dead. His tracks showed that he had run along the side of the battery, had turned sharp round the corner and, small doubt of it, must have dashed straight into the open arms of someone who was waiting there. His mouth was full of sand and stones, and his teeth and jaws were broken to bits. I only glanced once at his face. At the same moment, just as we were scrambling down from the battery to get over the body, we heard a shout, and saw a man running down the bank of the Martello Tower. He was the caretaker, stationed there, and his keen old eyes had managed to descry that, through the mist, that something was wrong. He had seen Paxton fall, and had seen us a moment after, running up. Fortunate this, for otherwise we could hardly have escaped suspicion of being connected in the dreadful business. Had he, we asked, caught sight of anyone attacking our friend? He could not be sure. We sent him off for help, and stayed by the dead man till they came with the stretcher. It was then that we traced out how he had come on the narrow fringe of sand under the battery wall. The rest was shingle, and it was hopefully impossible for us to tell whither the other had gone. What were we to say to the inquest? It was a duty we felt not to give up there and then the secret of the crown to be published in every paper. I don't know how much you would have told, but what we did agree upon was this: to say that we had only made acquaintance with Paxton the day before, and that he had told us he was under some apprehension of danger at the hands of a man called William Ager. Also, that we had seen some other tracks beside Paxton's when we followed him along the beach. But of course by that time everything was gone from the sands. No one had any knowledge, fortunately, of any William Ager living in the district. The evidence of the man at the Martello Tower freed us from all suspicion. All that could be done was to return a verdict of wilful murder by some person or persons unknown. Paxton was so totally without connections that all the inquiries that were subsequently made ended in no thoroughfare, and I have never been at Seaborough, or even near it, since. That was A Warning to the Curious by M.R. James. We have run quite a bit over, I'm afraid. That was a much longer one than I thought it was going to be. Can I grab my phone back?
Of course you
Thank
may.
Sasha. Okay, how many Ko-fis do we have? Okay, not an unmanageable number. Unless... yeah, okay, cool. Right. Sorry, I'll get the old book out for the Ko-fis. Right. B Chrono. I ran out of space on my Ko-fi, but I've had 13 stories on order in my local bookshop since before it came out. Here's hoping I get it soon. Also, Merry Christmas and Bitchin' Yule. Merry Christmas and Bitchin' Yule to you too. A Kofi from Leslie. Thank you so much for this. I love the works of M.R. James. I got out my best Edwardian outfit definitely just for this. Also have a Merry Christmas and a very happy holidays. Glad to hear about dressing for the part. That's lovely. Anomalies. One day I will make an M.R. James bingo card with things that always happen in M.R. James stories so you can play along when you read/listen to one of his stories. Old Hotel/Inn is definitely going in. Yeah, like academics digging something up. It's all good shit. Genetic Geekery gifted 5 subs. Thank you. Kofi from Doodlefee. I'm having to miss the second story, but I just wanted to say that after you and Sasha streamed the Thunderbirds game, I tracked down a copy for my dad, and he was very excited by it. I hope you, Sasha, Steve, and Katz have a delightful evening, and thank you for all the good content. Oh, that's really nice to hear. Johnny and Sash, good games for dads. A Kofi from
that's our brand.
A Kofi from Saya, or Saya. Merry Christmas and happy holidays, Johnny, Sasha, Steve, Katz, Mods, and chat. Thank you for the stream. Very nice chill vibes. I just wanted to share some cheer and wish everyone a safe and happy 2021. Safe and happy 2021 to you as well. Kofi from Elliot Jones. A happy Christmas to Johnny, Sasha, Steve, Katz, Mods, and chat from me and my dog. Can't wait for my copy of 13 Stories that's supposed to arrive tomorrow. That's nice. A Kofi from Moss. Merry Christmas all. Sparkling heart. Love listening to this while working on some late gifts, lol. Whoa, those are some late gifts. Good luck.
Sorry, we are currently gifting things to our mods, I feel like.
Yeah, okay, fine. But like I didn't mean, wasn't meant to be any shade. Just just engage. I'm just engaging with the comments that they give me. Vampire gender, vampire. Man, this is the nicest Twitch chat I've been in that I can remember. We have a lovely community. If you're not a regular on mine, Sasha's, and the MacGuffin and Company streams, it's just a lovely chat, lovely time. Also, like, we do stuff in the background while the chat is happening, but no one's really there for us. A Kofi from Aidenbird. Hi Johnny and Sasha and Mods and chat. I'm missing the stream today, but hope you are all having a lovely Christmas. Thank you for the streams. Can't wait for the VOD later. Cheers. Well, thank you, Aidenbird. A Kofi from Snappy. Hello Johnny, Sasha, Steve, and Katz. I finally got my copy of 13 Stories today after realising too late asking for it as an Xmas gift with family meant waiting till Xmas to get it, and I'm excited to read it. I hope you've all had a good day, and thank you for a really nice stream. Well, thank you for watching. It's been a lovely time. Hi again, chat. The front door blew mysteriously open, so in conclusion, I am haunted. Very sorry to hear about your imminent beach death. Or might be dragged into a well. Who knows? It's a toss up, but we'll wait and see. Vila Katzen. I'd like to think that the women and non-binary people of the M.R. James universe are just having a good time somewhere else, marrying ghouls. Quite possibly. It's who knows where they are. Because they're not staying in hotel rooms on the seafront, apparently. A Kofi from Rogapan. Love to all and cheers and health. Cheers and health to you as well. Vila Katz and Paxton could have died 10 times and I wouldn't have noticed. Sorry, Paxton. Yeah, I'm aware that no one's actually watching this to be like, oh, it's spooky. It's just me making some noises in the background. But you know how it is.
No, it's very festive and nice.
It is. It's festive noise. I'm making festive noise in the background. It's like fireplace for your home. Crackling. A Kofi from Gillian. Happy Christmas, Johnny, Sasha, chat, and mods. Have some money. Thank you, Gillian. Have some stream. A Kofi from Moss. I'm trying to give my friend a gift. Please tell them to accept it. They won't listen to me. Moss's friend, accept the gift. It's very important. Will this VOD be on YouTube? Oh, a good question. I'm not sure. Probably. I'll probably download it and upload it onto my YouTube channel at some point. You know what? Yeah, it's gonna be on. It's gonna be on YouTube, immortalizing for all time. That point where Sasha very audibly yawned at the most the most tense part of the story.
I'm so sorry. I didn't know I was doing it.
I just looked up and all of chat was just like, yawn.
If it helps, I saw the word yawn, and then I yawned again.
Chat made Sasha yawn. Okay, that's amazing.
They sent my own yawn back to me.
Well, that is... thank you all. I'm afraid any more Kofis that come in are going to have to... Psych! It was upside down! Not when I was reading it. I was actually reading from the book, but just that. It's fine. Just my little Christmas joke. I don't know, man. Thank you all very much for joining me on this most Chris of Thomas's. I hope you've had a lovely, slightly spooky but very Christmas evening. I believe you're streaming as normal on Tuesday, Sash.
Yeah, but we've got a stream on Sunday.
Oh yeah, we have our normal stream. We have our normal streams on Sunday. I don't know what we're going to be doing, but they're going to be, broadly speaking, normal. And yeah, so from myself, from Sash, from Steve, I'm gonna say whether he wants to or not, from the cats, and with their permission from the mods, I would just like to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thanks all, and good night.